The emergency session of Starfleet Command took place in a secured conference room aboard Deep Space Nine, 72 hours after the Infinity's destruction. Admiral William Ross sat at the head of a table crowded with holographic projections of Fleet Admiral Nechayev, Klingon Chancellor Gowron, and, to Captain Sisko's visible discomfort, a nondescript human woman who'd introduced herself simply as Sloan, from Starfleet Intelligence. Captain Thomas Lasky stood before them, datapad in hand, looking like a man who'd slept 3 hours in as many days. Master Chief stood behind him in freshly salvaged armor, a silent monument to UNSC resolve. "The proposal is straightforward," Lasky began, his voice carrying the exhausted certainty of someone past the point of diplomatic niceties. "A surgical strike on the Founders' homeworld. Eliminate their leadership, decapitate the Dominion's command structure, end the war." The silence that followed was profound. Admiral Ross broke it, his tone carefully neutral. "Captain Lasky, Starfleet doesn't conduct assassination missions against enemy leadership. It's contrary to every principle the Federation was built on." "With respect, Admiral," Lasky replied, "the UNSC spent 30 years fighting an enemy whose leadership, the Covenant Prophets, orchestrated the genocide of 23 billion human beings. When we finally located their command center, we eliminated them. The war ended within months. Not because we destroyed their fleets, but because we removed the ideological core that sustained their military." Chancellor Gowron's holographic image leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with predatory interest. "The human speaks wisdom. The Founders are the Dominion's heart. Cut it out, and the body dies. The Empire has argued for such actions since this war began. And the Federation has consistently rejected it," Nechayev countered sharply. "Because we don't win wars through assassination. We win through superior principles, through demonstrating that cooperation and democracy outlast authoritarianism. How's that working out?" The Master Chief's voice cut through the debate like a blade. Every head turned toward him. 2 years of war. How many ships lost? How many colonies occupied? How many billions under Dominion control? Your principles are admirable, Admiral. But principles don't stop Jem'Hadar from killing your people. Sloan, the Section 31 operative, smiled slightly, saying nothing. Sisko stood, his command presence filling the room. "Chief, we understand the UNSC's tactical perspective. But there's a difference between military necessity and murder. The Founders may be our enemies, but they're still sentient beings. Targeting them for elimination crosses a line the Federation has never crossed. You crossed it when you allied with Section 31, the Chief replied quietly, his helmet turning towards Sloan. When you developed biogenic weapons specifically designed to commit genocide against the Founders. Don't lecture us about lines when you've already stepped over them." The room went cold. Sloan's expression didn't change, but Sisko's face darkened with barely controlled anger. Anger directed not at the Chief, but at the uncomfortable truth he just voiced. "The difference," Sisko said tightly, "is that we chose not to deploy that weapon. We had the capability and rejected it." "Because you hoped you wouldn't need to," Lasky interjected. "But you developed it anyway. Which means Starfleet Command has already accepted that the Dominion might require measures beyond conventional warfare. We're simply proposing a more precise alternative: remove the Founders, spare the Vorta and Jem'Hadar. Your bioweapon would have killed every changeling in existence. Our plan targets only the leadership." Ross exchanged glances with Nechayev's hologram. The calculus was shifting. The UNSC had identified the Federation's hypocrisy and weaponized it. "Even if we accepted your premise," Nechayev said carefully, "the Founders' homeworld is in the Amarian Nebula, deep in Gamma Quadrant territory. It's surrounded by Jem'Hadar fleets, Dominion sensor nets, and defensive installations we've never successfully penetrated. A strike team wouldn't survive the approach. Which is why we're not sending a fleet," Lasky replied, pulling up tactical displays. "We're sending the most effective special operations soldiers in UNSC history." Spartans and Spartani versus, supported by orbital drop shock troopers. Small team, fast insertion, surgical extraction. The UNSC has conducted hundreds of missions like this. Against the Covenant, Ross observed. Not against an enemy that can change shape, infiltrate your team, and sabotage the mission from within. The chief spoke again. That's why we need Odo. Every person in the room turned toward the doorway, where Odo stood. Deep Space Nine's Changeling security chief, his expression unreadable. You want me to help you kill my own people, Odo said flatly. We want you to help us end a war your people started, the chief replied. The Founders view all solids as threats to be controlled or eliminated. They've genetically engineered the Vorta to worship them and the Jem'Hadar to die for them. They're conducting the same campaign of supremacy the Covenant used against humanity. You know this, Constable. You've seen what the Dominion does to conquered worlds. Odo's form rippled with barely suppressed emotion. I've also seen what solids do to changelings. Hunted, feared, killed for existing. The Founders' paranoia didn't emerge from nowhere. It was earned through centuries of persecution. Then help us break that cycle, Lasky said quietly. The UNSC isn't proposing genocide. We're proposing regime change. Remove the Founders who've chosen conquest, create space for changelings who might choose differently. You're proof that not all of your people embrace the Dominion's philosophy. One changeling's descent doesn't represent a movement, Odo countered. It does if you give others the choice, the chief said. Right now, the Founders control every changeling through the Great Link. They share thoughts, memories, identity. But you've stayed separate. That means independence is possible. Help us show them that. The silence stretched. Odo's internal conflict was visible in the way his humanoid form wavered at the edges, his controls slipping. Finally, Sloane spoke for the first time. The Federation Council will never officially authorize this mission. But Section 31 has resources, cloaking technology, intelligence assets in Dominion space, and extraction protocols. If Captain Lasky and his team want to conduct an unauthorized operation, we can ensure Starfleet has plausible deniability. Absolutely not, Ross said immediately. We're not outsourcing Black Ops to a displaced military force we've known for a week. Then the UNSC will conduct the operation independently, Lasky replied. We don't need Starfleet's permission to defend ourselves. The Dominion views us as strategic assets worth capturing. That makes them an active threat. UNSC standing orders allow for preemptive action against existential threats. Gowron's laughter boomed through the speakers. I like these humans. Captain Lasky, the Klingon Empire offers ships, warriors, and intelligence. We'll provide covering forces while your soldiers strike the Serpent's head. Nechayev held up a hand. Everyone stop. Captain Lasky, Master Chief, you're asking us to fundamentally compromise Federation principles. To endorse assassination, to collaborate with Section 31, to potentially trigger a Dominion response that could destroy us all. And you're doing it based on UNSC doctrine from a universe we can't verify even exists. The chief stepped forward, his damaged armor catching the light. Admiral, the Infinity's wreckage is floating 3,000 kilometers from this station. 143 bodies are in your morgue. Our universe exists. Our war happened. And our doctrine worked. Humanity survived. You're losing this war using your methods. Maybe it's time to try ours. Ross looked at Sisko. Captain, you've worked with these people. Your assessment? Sisko was quiet for a long moment, his command mask slipping to reveal genuine conflict. The UNSC is effective. Dangerously so. They've demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceed anything we've encountered. If anyone could successfully strike the Founders' homeworld, it would be them. He paused. But effectiveness isn't the same as wisdom. The question isn't whether they can do it, it's whether we should let them. We don't need your permission, Lasky said, not unkindly. But we'd prefer your cooperation. This can be a Section 31 operation with UNSC assets, giving you deniability. Or it can be an independent UNSC action that makes you look like you've lost control of your own allies. Your choice, Admiral. The ultimatum hung in the air, respectful but absolute. Ross exchanged a long look with Nechayev, some silent communication passing between flag officers who'd navigated 2 years of impossible decisions. 48 hours, Ross said finally. We'll provide a modified runabout with Romulan cloaking device, current intelligence on Dominion fleet movements, and access to Odo's knowledge of Changeling physiology. In exchange, this mission is entirely deniable. If you're captured, Starfleet will disavow all knowledge. If you succeed... He trailed off. If we succeed, the chief finished, the war ends. And the Federation doesn't have to compromise its principles because someone else already did. It wasn't endorsement. But it was permission. As the meeting dissolved, Odo approached the Master Chief. I haven't agreed to help. But you will, the chief replied. Because you know what the Founders are doing is wrong. And because you're the only one who can stop them without genocide. Odo's expression was unreadable. You don't know me well enough to make that assessment. I know soldiers, the chief said quietly. And I know what it looks like when someone's trying to save people from themselves. You'll help. Not for us, for them. The Changeling said nothing, but he didn't walk away. The UNSC's temporary operations center occupied a disused cargo bay on Deep Space Nine's lower levels, far from prying eyes and curious civilians. Master Chief stood before a holographic tactical display showing the Gamma Quadrant, surrounded by the team he'd assembled for what might be a one-way mission. Commander Sarah Palmer leaned against a crate of salvaged UNSC equipment, her Spartan 4 armor painted in tactical gray. Beside her, Lieutenant Paul DeMarco checked his MA-5D's action for the third time, nervous energy disguised as equipment maintenance. Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Banks represented the ODSTs, his weathered face bearing scars from a dozen Covenant deployments. And standing uncomfortably among the UNSC personnel were 2 Federation officers, Lieutenant Commander Jadzia Dax, whose 3 centuries of Trill experience made her invaluable for xenobiology analysis, and Lieutenant Nog, DS9's Ferengi engineer, whose technical expertise with salvage technology had impressed even UNSC specialists. This is the team? Banks asked, his skepticism evident. 4 Spartans, 6 ODSTs, and 2 Starfleet officers who've never done a hot drop. The Starfleet officers are observers, the chief replied. Section 31's requirement for mission legitimacy. They document, they advise, but they don't engage unless absolutely necessary. Dax smiled with unsettling confidence. Chief, I've lived 8 lifetimes. One of my previous hosts was a combat engineer during the Klingon Federation conflicts. I'm not as helpless as you think. And I fought Jem'Hadar borders during the station siege, Nog added, his oversized Ferengi ears twitching with nervous energy. I know I'm not a Spartan, but I can hold my own. Palmer pushed off the crate. No offense, Lieutenant, but holding your own and surviving a deep penetration strike into the most heavily defended system in Dominion space are different operational theaters. The cargo bay door hissed open, and Odo entered, his liquid form solidifying into his preferred humanoid shape. Behind him, a figure in nondescript civilian clothes followed, Sloan, the Section 31 operative. Constable, the chief acknowledged. You decided. I decided, Odo said, his voice heavy with resignation, that allowing the Founders to continue the Dominion's expansion unchecked will cost more Changeling lives than this mission might. The Great Link has become corrupted by paranoia. Someone needs to show them there's another way. Sloan stepped forward, producing a data chip. Current intelligence on Dominion fleet deployments, Jem'Hadar patrol patterns, and sensor net vulnerabilities. Updated as of 6 hours ago courtesy of assets we don't discuss in polite company. Banks took the chip, sliding it into the tactical display. The Gamma Quadrant map updated with dozens of red hostile indicators. Jem'Hadar patrol routes, Vorta administration centers, and deep in the nebula, a heavily fortified system marked simply, Founder Homeworld estimated location. Estimated? DeMarco questioned. The founders don't exactly publish their address, Sloan replied dryly. But we've triangulated their location based on Vorta communication patterns, Jem'Hadar supply routes, and information extracted from captured personnel. The Amarian Nebula contains approximately 47 star systems. We've narrowed it to 3 possibilities. That's not a surgical strike, Palmer observed. That's a reconnaissance nightmare. We could search for weeks and never find the right system. Odo stepped toward the display. I can identify the correct system once we're in the nebula. The Great Link has a presence, a signature that changelings can sense. It's not something your sensors can detect, but I'll know when we're close. The chief studied the changeling carefully. You're risking your connection to your people. The founders won't forgive this. They won't forgive me for existing independently, Odo replied. I made that choice years ago when I refused to return to the link. This is simply the consequence of that decision. Dax pulled up stellar cartography data. The Amarian Nebula's radiation signatures will interfere with both our sensors and Dominion detection grids. That works in our favor, if we can navigate through it. But the nebula's plasma storms are unpredictable. One wrong calculation and we'll be vaporized before the Jem'Hadar even know we're there. That's why we're taking the Rio Grande, Nog said, gesturing to the modified Danube-class runabout visible through the cargo bay's viewport. I've upgraded her shield emitters with salvaged Infinity components, installed a Romulan cloaking device Section 31 provided, and reinforced the hull with ablative armor. She's not a warship, but she'll get us there. Banks studied the runabout skeptically. That thing's barely 40 meters long. You're cramming 14 personnel, weapons, supplies, and extraction equipment into a ship designed for a crew of 4? We've worked with less, the chief said. Covenant insertion pods fit 3 ODSTs in 2 cubic meters. We'll manage. Palmer pulled up mission timelines. Insertion to extraction, 72 hours maximum. Any longer and we risk Dominion pattern analysis detecting our intrusion. We go in fast, locate the founders, complete the objective, and extract before they can mount an effective response. And the objective is? Dax asked pointedly. We've danced around it, but let's be explicit. Are we assassinating the founders, or is there another goal? The chief turned to face her fully. The objective is mission-dependent. Ideally, we capture a founder, bring them back to Federation space, demonstrate to the Great Link that solids can be reasoned with. Force negotiation. And if capture isn't possible? Dax pressed. Then we eliminate the founder's ability to coordinate Dominion military operations, the chief replied. Which might mean assassination. That's why you're here, Commander, to ensure we don't cross lines that can't be uncrossed. Sloan laughed, a cold, humorless sound. How noble! The UNSC brings its own moral guardrails. But let's be honest about what this mission is. An extrajudicial strike against enemy leadership using methods Starfleet publicly condemns. You're Section 31 with better PR. The difference, the chief said quietly, is that we're willing to live with the consequences. Section 31 hides in shadows. The UNSC owns its decisions. We'll see how long that conviction lasts, Sloan replied. When you're standing in the Great Link with a weapon in your hand and 300 changelings judging whether you're worthy of mercy. Odo's form rippled. The founders don't grant mercy to solids. They grant control or elimination. That's the binary they've created. Banks checked his chronometer. We've got 18 hours before the mission window opens. Dominion patrol schedules rotate, and we'll have a 6-hour gap in their sensor coverage. After that, we're going in blind against whatever defenses they've established. The chief nodded. Final equipment check in 12 hours. Everyone reviews Section 31's intelligence package and commits infiltration routes to memory. No digital maps once we're in Dominion space. If we're captured, they get nothing. UNSC paranoia, Dax observed. You really think the Founders could extract information from captured technology? The Covenant reverse-engineered UNSC Shaw Fujikawa drives from captured vessels, the chief replied. It extended the war by 5 years. We don't make that mistake twice. As the team dispersed to prepare, Palmer caught the chief's arm. John, this feels wrong. We're walking into the heart of enemy territory with incomplete intelligence, relying on a changeling who might betray us, taking orders from a shadow organization we don't trust, and hoping Federation officers don't compromise the mission when things get ugly. This isn't UNSC doctrine, this is desperation. The chief was quiet for a moment, his visor reflecting Palmer's concerned expression. Every UNSC operation for the last 30 years has been desperation, Sarah. We're just better at hiding it. This mission has a 37% probability of success based on available intelligence. That's better odds than most Covenant engagements. And the other 63%? We adapt. Like we always do. Palmer wasn't reassured, but she nodded. For what it's worth, the Spartan versus follow your lead. Whatever happens in that nebula, we finish the fight. Across the cargo bay, Odo stood alone, staring at the tactical display showing the Founder's estimated location. His liquid form shimmered with unspoken conflict. Duty to his adopted home versus loyalty to his species, pragmatism versus principle. Dax approached quietly. Second thoughts, Constable? Infinite thoughts, Odo replied. But only one choice. The Founders won't change on their own. Someone has to show them the cost of their philosophy. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then, Odo said. Because that's what makes the choice meaningful. In 18 hours, they would leave Federation space and enter the Dominion's heart. No support, no backup, no guarantee of survival. Just UNSC determination meeting Starfleet principles in the crucible of impossible choices. The USS Rio Grande slipped through the Bajoran wormhole at minimal impulse, its Romulan cloaking device humming with barely contained energy. Master Chief stood in the cramped runabout cockpit beside Nog, who piloted with the nervous precision of someone acutely aware they were flying into certain death. Wormhole transit complete, Nog announced, his voice tight. We're in the Gamma Quadrant. Dominion territory. Through the viewport, the swirling tunnel of the wormhole collapsed behind them, severing their connection to Federation space. The chief watched it disappear with the detachment of someone who'd made one-way trips before. Cloak holding stable, Dax reported from the science station. No Dominion sensors detected. We're ghosts. In the aft compartment, Palmer and the ODST team ran final weapons checks in the cramped space. MA-5D assault rifles, M6 magnums, combat knives, and enough explosives to level a small installation. Standard UNSC loadout for missions that wouldn't officially exist. Odo stood apart from the others, his liquid form occasionally rippling with what might have been anxiety or anticipation. The chief approached him. How long until you can sense the Great Link? We need to be within the nebula itself, Odo replied. The Founder's presence is subtle. Like hearing a familiar voice in a crowded room. I'll know it when I feel it. And if they sense you first? Odo's expression was unreadable. Then they'll know I'm coming. And they'll prepare accordingly. The runabout shuddered as it entered the Amarian Nebula's outer reaches, a roiling mass of ionized plasma and radiation that painted the view screen in angry reds and purples. Nog's hands danced across the helm controls, navigating by instinct as sensors became increasingly unreliable. Plasma density increasing, Dax reported. Shields are holding, but we're approaching operational limits. Much deeper and we risk cascade failures. Keep going, the chief ordered. The Founders wouldn't hide somewhere easily accessible. A proximity alarm shrieked. Nog killed it immediately, pulling up tactical displays. Jem'Hadar patrol, 3 attack ships on intercept course. They're running active sensors. Chief, they shouldn't be able to see us through the cloak. Unless they're not looking for cloaked ships, Dax said grimly. They're scanning for mass displacement in the plasma field. The nebula itself is giving us away. Palmer appeared in the cockpit doorway, rifle in hand. Options? We can't outrun them, Nog said. And if we decloak to fight, every Dominion ship in the sector will know we're here. The chief studied the tactical display. 3 attack ships moving in coordinated search pattern, tightening the net with each pass. Standard Jem'Hadar doctrine, methodical, efficient, inevitable. How close can we get to that plasma storm? The chief pointed to a massive electromagnetic disturbance roiling through the nebula ahead. Nog's eyes widened. That's a Class 5 plasma cyclone. The radiation alone would fry our shields in seconds. We'd be torn apart. Or we'd disappear. The chief countered. The Jem'Hadar won't follow us into that. They'd rather wait for us to emerge. Assuming we emerge, Dax interjected. Chief, this isn't a calculated risk. It's suicide with extra steps. Better than certain capture, Palmer said. Do it. Nog swallowed hard, then adjusted course. The Rio Grande accelerated toward the swirling maelstrom of superheated plasma and electromagnetic chaos. Behind them, the Jem'Hadar ships closed the distance, their weapons charging. They are firing! Dax shouted. Polaron beams lanced through space, their purple energy illuminating the nebula. One beam struck a glancing blow against the runabout's shields, and alarms shrieked as power fluctuated. Shields at 60%, Nog reported. One more hit like that and the Rio Grande plunged into the plasma storm. Reality became chaos. The runabout pitched violently as electromagnetic forces battered its hull from every direction. The view screen showed nothing but white-hot plasma and lightning-like discharges that could vaporize unshielded matter. Warning klaxons blared as systems failed in cascading sequence. Shields failing! Dax's hands flew across her console. Hull integrity at 43% and dropping. In the aft compartment, the ODSTs braced themselves against bulkheads as the artificial gravity failed intermittently. Banks grabbed a support strut, his knuckles white. We're going to die in a damn Federation taxi. The chief moved to the engineering station, his armor's mag boots locking him to the deck. Reroute emergency power to forward shields. Vent plasma from the port nacelle, create a pressure differential. That'll destabilize our warp field, Nog protested. We're not at warp. Do it. Nog complied, and superheated plasma vented from the runabout's port nacelle in a brilliant orange jet. The pressure differential created thrust that pushed the Rio Grande into a slightly less turbulent corridor through the storm. It's working, Dax said with surprise and relief. Hull stress decreasing. We're. The ship lurched violently as something massive moved through the plasma nearby. The sensors, what few still functioned, detected a shape larger than the Rio Grande, organic and ancient. What was that? Palmer demanded. Odo moved to the viewport, his liquid form pressing against the transparent aluminum. Nebula dweller. Plasma-based life form. They're rare, but the founders knew about them. They're harmless unless provoked. Let's not provoke it, the chief said. Nog, how long until we clear the storm? 2 minutes at current velocity. But chief, our shields are at 18%. If we encounter another Jem'Hadar patrol. We won't. Odo interrupted suddenly. His humanoid features had gone slack, eyes unfocused. I can feel them. The founders. Bearing 273 Mark 15. Distance, 12 million kilometers. Dax pulled up stellar cartography overlaying Odo's bearing. A single star system appeared unremarkable except for one detail. It was completely absent from Dominion navigational databases. Deliberately hidden. That's it, she breathed. The founder's homeworld. The Rio Grande emerged from the plasma storm like a ghost, its hull scorched and shields barely functional but still cloaked. Ahead, the hidden star system beckoned, a yellow dwarf with 7 planets, the 4th shrouded in question marks and classified warnings. No orbital defenses, Dax reported with obvious confusion. No weapon platforms, no sensor nets, nothing. It's completely undefended. That we can detect, Palmer corrected. Chief, this feels like a trap. It's not a trap, Odo said quietly. It's confidence. The Founders don't believe anyone could reach this far into their territory. They don't need defenses because they've never needed them. Banks appeared in the cockpit. So we're the first idiots stupid enough to try. Or the first ones desperate enough. The chief replied. Nog, take us to the fourth planet. Low orbit, minimal signature. We'll conduct reconnaissance before committing to insertion. As the runabout approached the planet, details resolved. A world of vast oceans with minimal landmass, atmospheric composition rich in compounds that would be toxic to most humanids. No cities, no infrastructure, no signs of conventional civilization. Where's the Great Link? Dax asked. Odo pointed to one of the larger oceans. There. The entire ocean is the Great Link. Millions of changelings in liquid form, sharing consciousness and purpose. That's where the Founders exist when they're not maintaining humanoid form for interactions with solids. Palmer stared at the ocean. You're telling me the entire Dominion leadership is just swimming around down there? No guards, no protection? They don't need protection, Odo said. What can solids do to an ocean of shapeshifters? You can't shoot liquid. You can't imprison beings that flow through any barrier. The Founders are effectively invulnerable in their natural state. The chief studied the planet thoughtfully. But they need to maintain humanoid form to communicate with Vorda and Jem'Hadar. That's when they're vulnerable. You're proposing we wait for a Founder to leave the link and kidnap them? Dax asked incredulously. No, the chief replied. I'm proposing we go into the link and bring one out. The cockpit went silent. That's impossible, Odo finally said. Solids can't survive in the Great Link. The biological incompatibility alone would kill you in seconds. And even if you survived, the Founders would sense your presence immediately. You'd be sharing consciousness with millions of changelings who view you as the enemy. But you could survive, the chief said, turning to face Odo fully. You could enter the link, convince one Founder to separate, and bring them to the surface. Odo's form rippled with something that looked like horror. You're asking me to betray the Great Link from within. To use our most sacred connection as a weapon. I'm asking you to give them a choice, the chief countered. Right now, the Founders exist in echo chamber where all they hear is their own fear and paranoia. You represent something different. A changeling who's lived among solids and learned they're not the enemy. Show them that truth. And if they reject it? The chief's voice was quiet but firm. Then we move to contingency plans. But we tried diplomacy first. That's the Federation way, isn't it? Odo looked at Dax, who nodded slowly. He's right, Odo. We came here to end the war, but that doesn't have to mean violence. If you can reach even one Founder. The changeling was silent for a long moment, his liquid form reflecting the planet's light. Finally, I'll try. But understand, if the Founders sense deception, they'll consume me. Absorb my consciousness into the link permanently. I'll cease to exist as an individual. That's the risk. The chief acknowledged. But it's one worth taking. Palmer shook her head. This is insane. We're betting the entire mission on changeling telepathy and hope? We're betting on what makes us different from the Dominion. The chief replied. They use fear and control. We use trust and choice. Let's see which philosophy wins. The Rio Grande descended through the planet's atmosphere in near silence, its cloaking device straining under the electromagnetic interference from the ionized clouds. Odo stood at the forward viewport, watching the vast ocean of the Great Link grow larger with each passing second. Atmospheric composition is stable enough for landing, Nog reported. But Chief, the surface temperature is 43 degrees Celsius. Those oceans aren't water, they're liquid changelings. We're literally parking on top of the Dominion's leadership. Set us down on that landmass. the chief ordered, pointing to a small rocky outcropping barely 200 meters across. Keep the engines hot and shields ready. If this goes wrong, we'll have seconds to escape. The runabout touched down with a gentle thud, landing struts finding purchase on alien stone. Through the viewport, the great link stretched to the horizon. A shimmering golden-orange liquid that moved with unsettling purpose, forming temporary waves and patterns that suggested vast intelligence beneath the surface. Palmer assembled the strike team in the aft compartment. ODSTs, establish a perimeter. 40-meter spread, overlapping fields of fire. If anything solid emerges from that ocean that isn't Odo, you put it down. No warnings, no hesitation. Banks nodded grimly, distributing motion sensors. What about things that aren't solid? What if the changelings just flow onto the island? Then we find out if bullets work on liquid. Palmer replied. Move out. The airlock cycled, and the team emerged into oppressive heat and humidity. The air tasted metallic, charged with something that made human instincts scream danger. DeMarco took position behind a rock formation, his rifle's scope trained on the ocean's edge. Inside the runabout, Odo began removing his Bajoran militia uniform. The solid form identity he'd maintained for years. Dax watched with scientific fascination and personal concern. Constable, you don't have to do this. We can find another way. There is no other way, Odo replied, his voice carrying resignation and determination. The Founders won't negotiate with solids. But they might listen to one of their own, if I can reach them before they consume me. The chief approached, carrying a small device, a UNSC neural interface transponder, modified by Nog. This will maintain a comm link while you're in the link. It's keyed to Changeling bioelectric signatures. We'll be able to track your position and extract you if necessary. Odo took the device, his liquid form absorbing it into his body. Chief, if I don't return within 1 hour, leave? Don't wait, don't attempt rescue. The Founders will have already absorbed my consciousness, and they'll be coming for you. We don't leave people behind, the chief said flatly. I'm not people, Odo replied. I'm a changeling who chose solids over the link. If this fails, I'm already gone. Don't compound that loss with your own deaths. Before the chief could respond, Odo's form began to liquefy. His humanoid shape collapsed into shimmering amber fluid that flowed across the runabout deck toward the open airlock. The chief and Dax followed, watching as Odo poured down the landing struts and onto the rocky shore. For a moment, Odo's liquid form hesitated at the ocean's edge, a final pause before crossing a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. Then he flowed forward, merging with the great link in a ripple of golden light. The ocean's surface erupted with activity. Waves formed and collapsed, patterns emerged and dissolved, and a sound like distant thunder rolled across the water, millions of changelings reacting to the presence of one who'd been separate for so long. Inside the runabout, the neural transponder activated. Dax monitored the signal, her trill spots darkening with concentration. I'm reading his bioelectric signature. He's descending. Moving deeper into the link. Chief, the electromagnetic activity is increasing exponentially. It's like watching a neural network activate all at once. Is he in danger? I don't know. Changeling biology is beyond my expertise. This could be normal integration, or it could be. The ocean exploded. A column of liquid changeling matter erupted 50 meters into the air, taking temporary humanoid shape before collapsing back into formlessness. Then another. And another. The Great Link was responding to Odo's presence with what could only be described as rage, or fear. Contact! Banks shouted from the perimeter. Multiple forms emerging from the ocean. They're not holding shape, just probing toward our position. Palmer's voice crackled through comms. Hold fire unless they cross the 30-meter line. Don't give them an excuse to classify this as an attack. Tendrils of liquid changeling extended from the ocean toward the rocky outcropping, testing, searching, analyzing. The ODSTs tracked them with rifle sights, fingers resting on triggers with practiced restraint. Dax's console erupted with alerts. Chief, Odo's neural signature is fragmenting. The link is pulling him apart, distributing his consciousness across multiple changelings. If this continues, he'll cease to exist as an individual, the chief finished. How long until total dissolution? Minutes. Maybe less. The chief made a decision. Nog, prepare for immediate extraction. Palmer, pull the perimeter back to the runabout. We're getting him out. Chief, he said not to. Dax protested. I don't care what he said. We don't abandon people. Before anyone could move, the ocean stilled. The violent eruption ceased, the probing tendrils withdrew, and an eerie calm descended. Then, slowly, a single figure began forming at the water's edge. But it wasn't Odo. The changeling that emerged was ancient, if such a term could apply to liquid beings. It held a female humanoid form with unsettling perfection, every detail of skin and hair rendered with the kind of precision that suggested this form had been practiced for centuries. The female changeling, one of the Founders' Leadership Council, walked onto the rocky shore with regal confidence. Interesting, she said, her voice carrying across the clearing. Solids have never dared approach the Great Link before. Your species learns boldness quickly. The chief stepped off the runabout's ramp, his MA-5D lowered but ready. We came to talk. To end this war without more bloodshed. Talk, the female changeling repeated, as if tasting the word. How very solid of you. You believe words can change what millennia of persecution has taught us. That centuries of fear can be erased by one conversation? Your changeling, Odo, believes it, the chief replied. He's lived among solids. Learned we're not your enemy. Odo is confused. The female changeling said, her expression shifting to something almost like pity. He's been separated from the link too long. Forgotten what it means to be changeling. The Great Link is attempting to remind him, to reintegrate his perspective into the whole. You're erasing him, Dax said angrily, emerging from the runabout. Consuming his individuality because it contradicts your worldview. We are correcting his misconceptions. The female changeling countered calmly. The link shares truth. His experiences among solids have given him false impressions, that your species can be trusted, that coexistence is possible. The Great Link knows better. We've seen how solids treat what they fear. How they hunt, imprison, and destroy what they don't understand. Because you've given them reason to fear, the chief said. You created the Dominion. Engineered slave species. Invaded the Alpha Quadrant. You've proven yourselves the threat you claim to fear. The female changeling tilted her head. We did what was necessary to survive. The Dominion exists because solids forced us to protect ourselves. Every Vorta engineered to worship, every Jem'Hadar bred for war, every world conquered, all of it is defense against your inevitable persecution. That's circular logic, Dax argued. You can't justify conquest by claiming you're defending yourself from potential future threats. Can we? The female changeling's smile was cold. Your Federation developed a biogenic weapon specifically designed to commit genocide against my species. Don't lecture me about justification while Section 31 holds extinction in reserve. The chief couldn't deny it. The Federation's moral high ground had been compromised the moment they'd created the Changeling virus, even if they'd chosen not to deploy it. We came here to offer an alternative, the chief said. Peace. Negotiation. An end to the war that doesn't require genocide or conquest. And in exchange? The female changeling asked. What do solids want from the Founders? Recognition, the chief replied. Acknowledgement that solids deserve to exist independently. That we're not inferior beings requiring your control. The female changeling laughed, a sound without warmth. Master Chief John 117. Did you think we didn't know who you were? The moment Odo entered the link, we learned everything he knows. Including his experiences with you. A super soldier engineered from childhood, augmented to be superior to baseline humans, trained to view the galaxy through tactical assessments and threat matrices. You're no different from us. The words hit harder than the chief expected. The difference, he said quietly, is that I chose to keep fighting for humanity's right to exist, not to conquer them. Because humanity is your species. The female changeling replied. What would you do if another species threatened human extinction? If the only way to guarantee survival was to control them before they could destroy you, wouldn't you do exactly what the Dominion does? The chief was silent. Because the honest answer was yes. The UNSC had done exactly that during the insurrection, suppressing human colonies that threatened stability. They'd made impossible choices in the name of survival. The difference, Dax interjected, is that we're trying to evolve beyond that thinking. The Federation was built on the principle that diversity strengthens rather than threatens. That multiple species can coexist without one dominating the others. A beautiful lie, the female changeling said. One that your war with us has already exposed. But I didn't come here to debate philosophy. She turned toward the ocean. I came to return your changeling. The water stirred, and Odo's form emerged, but changed. His humanoid shape was less defined, his features blurred as if he was struggling to maintain cohesion. He collapsed onto the shore, his liquid form barely holding together. Odo! Dax rushed forward, but the chief caught her arm. He's alive, the female changeling said. But he's been reminded of what he abandoned. The Great Link showed him the truth of solid nature. Their fear, their violence, their inevitable betrayal. He knows now what we've always known. Odo's form slowly solidified into his familiar shape. When he looked up, his eyes carried something new and terrible. Knowledge. And doubt. Odo staggered forward, his movements uncoordinated, as if he'd forgotten how to maintain humanoid form. Dax caught him before he collapsed, her trill strength supporting his weight as his body wavered between solid and liquid. Constable, what did they do to you? She asked, scanning him with her tricorder. Your molecular cohesion is fluctuating. You're barely holding shape. They showed me everything. Odo's voice was hollow, distant. Centuries of memories. Changelings hunted across a dozen worlds. Dissected by solids trying to understand us. Imprisoned in laboratories. Killed for existing. The founders didn't create the Dominion from paranoia. They created it from experience. The chief kept his rifle trained on the female changeling, who watched with detached interest. That doesn't justify enslaving entire species. Doesn't it? Odo looked at him, and his eyes carried the weight of centuries he'd just experienced through the Great Link. Chief, I saw what the UNSC did during the insurrection. The orbital bombardments of colonial settlements. The acceptable casualties counted in millions. You tell yourself it was necessary, that human survival required it. The founders tell themselves the same thing. That was different. How? Odo interrupted, his voice gaining strength. Because they were human insurgents instead of alien species? Because your species' survival mattered more than their independence? The founders made the same calculation. Changeling survival justifies Dominion expansion. You can't condemn them without condemning yourself. The words struck like physical blows because they carry truth the chief couldn't deny. The UNSC had made terrible choices during the insurrection, civilian casualties, scorched earth tactics, suppression of legitimate grievances, all in the name of preventing human fragmentation before the Covenant threat emerged. Palmer's voice crackled through comms. Chief, we've got incoming. Multiple Jem'Hadar transports breaking through the cloud layer. They know we're here. The female changeling smiled. Did you think the Great Link wouldn't call for protection? Your presence here is an act of war, Master Chief. The moment your runabout entered this system, you committed to consequences. Banks reported from the perimeter. 6 transports, dropping altitude fast. Estimate 200 Jem'Hadar soldiers deploying in 3 minutes. Chief, we need to extract now. Dax helped Odo toward the runabout while the chief maintained his position facing the female changeling. This doesn't have to escalate. We came to talk, let us leave peacefully. You came to kidnap a founder. She corrected. To decapitate our leadership. Did you think we wouldn't see through Odo's compromised consciousness? The moment he entered the link, we knew everything. Your mission parameters, your Federation handlers, your Section 31 support. You're not diplomats, Master Chief. You're assassins who lost their nerve. The first Jem'Hadar transport screamed overhead, its atmospheric engines howling. Combat-armored soldiers began rappelling down, hitting the ground in tactical formations that spoke of extensive training. Their Kartakin polearms gleamed alongside disruptor rifles as they established a perimeter around the rocky outcropping. Fall back. Palmer ordered. The ODSTs retreated in leapfrog pattern, maintaining covering fire positions as they converged on the runabout. The chief didn't move, his rifle still trained on the female changeling. You're making a mistake. The UNSC came here to end the war, not escalate it. But if you force our hand... You'll what? She interrupted. Destroy me? Kill a founder? Go ahead, Chief. Pull the trigger. Prove that solids are exactly what we've always claimed. Violent, unpredictable, and fundamentally dangerous. Her smile widened. Or prove Odo right. Show me that solids can exercise restraint when given the opportunity for violence. It was a trap, perfectly constructed. If the chief fired, he'd validate everything the founders believed about solids. If he didn't, the Jem'Hadar would capture the team and extract every piece of intelligence they possessed about UNSC technology, Federation capabilities, and Section 31 operations. Chief. Nog's voice from the runabout was panicked. Jem'Hadar are surrounding us. We're out of time. The Jem'Hadar first approached, his Kartakin lowered but ready. UNSC soldiers, you will surrender your weapons and submit to Dominion custody. Resistance will be met with lethal force. DeMarco's rifle tracked the first. Chief, give the word. We can punch through their line if we move now. But 200 Jem'Hadar against 12 personnel, even with Spartan augmentation and ODST training, was suicide mathematics. The chief had survived 30 years of warfare by knowing when fights were winnable and when they required alternative strategies. He lowered his rifle. Stand down, the chief ordered. All personnel, weapons on the ground. We surrender. Chief, what? Palmer protested. That's an order, Commander. We stand down. The ODSTs reluctantly complied, placing their MA-5DS and sidearms on the rocky ground. The Jem'Hadar moved in with professional efficiency, securing the weapons and beginning to restrain the team with industrial-strength bindings. The female changeling approached the chief, studying him with something that might have been curiosity. Interesting choice. I expected UNSC doctrine to prioritize death over capture. Code protocol applies to ships and classified technology, the chief replied. Not personnel. We surrender because 14 lives matter more than proving a point. How pragmatic. And yet you just handed the Dominion everything, UNSC tactical knowledge, Federation intelligence, Section 31 operational details. All because you chose survival over security. The chief met her gaze through his visor. No. I chose survival over pride. There's a difference. Odo, now restrained alongside Dax and Nog, spoke weakly. He chose what changelings could never choose, vulnerability. The founders hide behind the Dominion because you're terrified of being hurt again. The chief just demonstrated trust that you won't abuse his surrender. That's the difference between solids and you. The female changeling's expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that might have been recognition. Or doubt. Take them to the transport. She ordered the Jem'Hadar first. They'll be interrogated at the nearest Vorta administration facility. The founders will decide their fate. As the team was marched toward the Jem'Hadar transports, Banks muttered to DeMarco. This is it? We surrender without firing a shot? We came all this way just to get captured? We came to start a conversation, the chief replied quietly. Sometimes that requires showing your enemy you're willing to trust them before they'll trust you. And if they don't? Banks asked. Then we tried. That matters. The female changeling watched them board the transport, her liquid form rippling with internal conflict. Odo's words had struck deeper than she'd admit. The accusation that founders hid behind proxies because they feared vulnerability. As the transport lifted off, carrying the UNSC team toward Dominion custody, the female changeling returned to the ocean's edge. She paused before entering the Great Link, looking back at the rocky outcropping where solids had stood and surrendered rather than fight. It was unexpected. And that uncertainty, that crack in absolute conviction, was exactly what Odo and the chief had hoped to create. Aboard the transport, Dax leaned toward the chief. You do have an escape plan, right? Please tell me this isn't actually surrender. The chief's armor shifted slightly, accessing encrypted UNSC protocols the Jem'Hadar scanners hadn't detected. Palmer, status check. Palmer's response came through Neuralink comm systems built into their armor, inaudible to anyone without UNSC implants. Armor systems online. Combat protocols ready. Waiting for your signal. Nog, the chief subvocalized. How long until the Rio Grande's autopilot executes emergency extraction? The Ferengi's eyes widened in understanding. 30 minutes. But chief, without us aboard. It'll come to us. The chief replied. Federation AI isn't sophisticated enough for autonomous combat, but UNSC protocols are. Roland's matrix fragment in DS9's computers uploaded tactical subroutines to the runabout before we left. It'll track our transponders and extract us when the moment's right. Dax stared at him. You plan to get captured? I plan for the possibility. The chief corrected. The founders needed to see solids choose vulnerability. Now they have. But that doesn't mean we're actually staying captured. Odo, still weakened from his Great Link integration, managed a small smile. You're more devious than I gave you credit for, Chief. I learned from the best. The chief replied. Cortana used to say the best tactics are the ones your enemy doesn't see coming because they contradict your established patterns. The UNSC never surrenders, so surrender becomes the perfect misdirection. The Jem'Hadar first turned from the pilot's station. Silence. Prisoners do not speak. The chief complied, but through Neuralink, he transmitted to his team. 28 minutes until extraction. Stay alert. When the Rio Grande arrives, we move fast and violent. No hesitation, no mercy. Show them what UNSC Special Operations actually looks like. Palmer's response carried grim satisfaction. Finally. I was getting tired of playing diplomat. Outside the transport's viewports, the Founders' Homeworld receded into the distance. But the mission wasn't over. It was just entering its second phase. And the Dominion was about to learn that capturing UNSC personnel wasn't the same as controlling them. The Dominion interrogation facility was a monument to utilitarian brutality. Gray metal walls, harsh white lighting, and the pervasive smell of fear that had soaked into the deck plating over years of extracting information from captured prisoners. The UNSC team had been separated into individual cells, their armor stripped, weapons confiscated, and restraints applied with Jem'Hadar efficiency. Master Chief sat in a featureless room, still in his black tech suit, hands bound behind his back with reinforced uranium cuffs. Across from him, a Vorta administrator named Kevin studied a datapad with the pleasant expression of someone reviewing grocery lists rather than interrogation protocols. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117, Kevin said, his voice carrying the unsettling courtesy all Vorta seemed to possess. Your service record is quite impressive. 30 years of continuous combat operations, 73 confirmed Covenant capital ship destructions, single-handedly responsible for breaking the siege of New Alexandria. The Founders are very interested in understanding how one soldier achieved such results. The chief remained silent, his augmented eyes tracking the room's dimensions, security camera positions, and the Jem'Hadar guard standing by the door with a disruptor rifle. The silent treatment, Kevin observed. How predictable. But you should know, we have ways of extracting information that don't require your cooperation. Jem'Hadar telepathic probes, Vorta neural scanners, and if necessary, the Founders can simply absorb your cellular structure and retrieve memories directly from your DNA. Then why talk? The Chief asked, his voice flat. Because the Founders prefer willing cooperation. Kevin replied. It's more efficient. And because I suspect you're intelligent enough to recognize when resistance is futile. He leaned forward. Help us understand UNSC tactical doctrine, and we can make your imprisonment comfortable. Refuse, and the extraction process will be considerably less pleasant. The Chief's internal chronometer counted down, 23 minutes until Rio Grande extraction. He needed to stall. What do you want to know? Kevin's smile widened. Let's start with your augmentation procedures. The Founders are fascinated by how human scientists created super soldiers. The process, the technology, the success rates, we want to replicate it for Dominion forces. You already have the Jem'Hadar, the Chief observed. Genetically engineered soldiers loyal unto death. Why do you need Spartans? Because the Jem'Hadar are limited, Kevin said with surprising candor. They lack creativity, adaptability beyond tactical parameters. You Spartans demonstrate independent strategic thinking while maintaining mission focus. That's the enhancement the Dominion seeks. 21 minutes. In another cell, Commander Palmer faced her own interrogator. A different Vorta named Laren who seemed more interested in psychological manipulation than direct questioning. Commander Sarah Palmer. Spartan 4 Program. Adult Volunteer Augmentation. Tell me, Commander, how does it feel knowing you chose to become a weapon? The Spartan I is like your chief were children, unable to consent. But you walked into that laboratory willingly. Palmer's jaw tightened. I chose to protect humanity. That's not the same as being a weapon. Isn't it? Luaren tilted his head. You allowed scientists to chemically and surgically alter your body, to implant neural interfaces, to enhance your aggression responses and suppress emotional regulation. You traded your humanity for combat effectiveness. How is that different from what the Founders did creating the Jem'Hadar? The Jem'Hadar don't have a choice. Palmer shot back. They're born into servitude, genetically programmed to worship the Founders and die without question. I can resign from service any time I want. Can you? Luaren asked softly. Or would your augmentations make civilian life impossible? Could you live among baseline humans knowing you're fundamentally different? Could you form relationships with people who aren't soldiers, start a family, grow old naturally? He paused. Or did the Spartan 4 program take those choices away the moment you accepted augmentation? Palmer had no answer. Because he was right. Spartans existed in a liminal space between human and something else, too altered to fully integrate into civilian society, but too human to be merely weapons. 19 minutes. Dax found herself facing a Vorta scientist named Yelgrun who seemed genuinely curious rather than hostile. A Trill joined with a symbiont. Yelgrun marveled, reviewing her bioscan data. 8 lifetimes of accumulated knowledge and experience. Fascinating. The Founders would be very interested in this form of memory preservation. Tell me, Commander, when you die, does the Dax symbiont retain your memories perfectly, or do they degrade over time? Why does it matter? Dax asked. Because the Great Link is similar, a collective consciousness where individual experiences merge into shared knowledge. But changelings don't die and pass memories forward. They exist continuously, sharing everything simultaneously. Your symbiont relationship might help us understand if linear memory transfer has advantages over concurrent sharing. Dax realized with growing unease that the Dominion wasn't just interrogating them for tactical intelligence. They were studying them, analyzing human and Federation biology for potential integration into Dominion genetics. 17 minutes. Nog sat alone in his cell, hyperventilating. The young Ferengi engineer had never been trained for interrogation resistance. When the door opened and a Vorta entered, he nearly broke. "Lieutenant Nog." The Vorta, a female named Eris, said gently. "I know you're frightened. You're not a soldier like your companions. You're an engineer and analyst. Someone who values logic over violence. I can respect that. What do you want?" Nog's voice shook. "Just conversation. Tell me about Deep Space Nine's defensive capabilities. Shield frequencies, weapon placements, structural vulnerabilities. Technical information, nothing strategic. Surely there's no harm in discussing engineering specifications?" Nog's Ferengi survival instincts warred with Starfleet loyalty. The 85th rule of acquisition. Death is an expensive price to pay for honor. But he'd sworn an oath when he joined Starfleet. 15 minutes. Odo's interrogation was different. The female changeling herself had come, entering his cell and studying him with unreadable expression. "You disappoint me, Odo," she said quietly. "We welcomed you back into the Great Link, showed you our history, our pain, our justified fear of solids. And still you cling to them. Why?" "Because I've lived among them," Odo replied, his voice still weak from the link integration. "I've seen their capacity for compassion, for growth, for choosing cooperation over conquest. The solids aren't perfect, but they're trying to be better. That's more than the Founders can claim. We don't need to be better," she countered. "We need to survive. The Dominion ensures changeling survival. That's all that matters." "At what cost?" Odo asked. "You've enslaved the Vorta, bred the Jem'Hadar as cannon fodder, conquered dozens of species. You've become exactly what you feared solids would become, the oppressors." The female changeling's expression hardened. "We provide order, structure, purpose. The species within the Dominion are safer, more prosperous, more stable than they ever were independently. We've eliminated war, poverty, and chaos from our territory. That's not oppression, it's enlightenment. Forced enlightenment," Odo said. "Which is still slavery." 13 minutes. Back in the chief's interrogation room, Kevin was growing impatient. "You're stalling. I can see it in your biometric readings, elevated heart rate, increased neural activity, constant chronometric assessment. You're waiting for something." "What?" The chief remained silent. "No matter," Kevin said, standing. "The Founders have authorized direct memory extraction. The process will be unpleasant, but thorough. We'll know everything within the hour. UNSC Tactical Doctrine, Section 31 Operations, Federation Defensive Capabilities. Your silence only delays the inevitable." He gestured to the Jem'Hadar guard. "Prepare him for neural extraction." The guard moved forward, disruptor rifle raised, and the facility's lights went out. Emergency power kicked in 3 seconds later, bathing everything in red. Alarms shrieked. And through the walls, the distinctive sound of MA-5D assault rifle fire echoed. Kevin's pleasant expression vanished. "What?" The interrogation room's door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and molten metal. Commander Palmer stood in the breach, her Spartan armor restored, rifle smoking. Behind her, Banks and DeMarco provided covering fire against responding Jem'Hadar. "Extraction time, Chief," Palmer said, tossing him his armor components. Rio Grande's autopilot punched through the facility's shields. "We've got maybe 3 minutes before Jem'Hadar reinforcements lock down the entire complex." The chief caught his helmet, snapping it onto the Texit's collar seal with practiced efficiency. "Status on the rest of the team?" "Dax and Nog are secured. Odo's still with the female changeling. He asked for 2 more minutes." "Denied," the chief said, attaching armor plating with mechanical speed. "We extract everyone now." Kevin backed against the wall, his Vorta confidence evaporating. "You can't escape. The entire facility is locked down. Hundreds of Jem'Hadar between you and freedom." The chief picked up his recovered MA-5D, chambering around. "Then I guess we'll have to go through them." Palmer grinned behind her visor. "Now that's the UNSC I know. They breached into the corridor where chaos reigned. The Rio Grande had punched through the facility's outer hull, its weapons systems on full autonomous combat mode, firing pulse phasers at Jem'Hadar defensive positions while maintaining position for evacuation. Odo and Dax were being escorted by ODSTs toward the runabout's extended docking ramp. The female changeling appeared at the corridor's end, her form rippling with fury. "You betray our mercy! We spared your lives. You tried to extract our memories," the chief replied, firing a controlled burst that forced her to shift into liquid form to avoid the rounds. "That's not mercy, that's intelligence gathering." "Then you've learned nothing," she shouted as her form reconstituted. "Solids will always choose violence over cooperation. We chose escape over execution." Odo countered from the Rio Grande's entrance. "There's a difference." The runabout's engines flared. Jem'Hadar disruptor fire pounded against its shields as more soldiers poured into the docking bay. The chief and Palmer laid down suppressing fire, their Spartan reflexes allowing them to target with precision even while retreating. "Everyone aboard!" the chief ordered. "Nog, get us out of here!" The team piled into the runabout. The chief was last, turning to fire one final burst before sealing the airlock. Through the closing hatch, he saw the female changeling standing amid the carnage, her expression unreadable. Then the Rio Grande's engines screamed to full power, and they punched through the facility's compromised shields into open space. Behind them, the Dominion interrogation facility receded, damaged, but not destroyed. Jem'Hadar fighters launched in pursuit, but the runabout's Romulan cloak engaged, and they disappeared into the nebula's plasma storms. Inside, the team collapsed against bulkheads, breathing hard. "So much for diplomacy," Banks muttered. "We tried," Odo said quietly. "That matters." But as the chief stared at the tactical display showing Dominion ships swarming like angry insects, he wondered if trying had been enough, or if they just made everything worse. The Rio Grande limped through the Amarian Nebula with half its systems failing and Jem'Hadar attacked ships scouring every cubic kilometer for their signature. Nog hunched over the helm, sweat beading on his forehead as he navigated blind through plasma storms that should have vaporized them hours ago. "Cloak is failing," he reported, voice tight. "The Jem'Hadar disruptor hits compromised the power couplings. We've got maybe 30 minutes before we're visible to every sensor in the sector." Palmer stripped damaged armor plating, revealing scorch marks and melted circuitry underneath. "Chief, we can't make it back to the wormhole like this. We need to find somewhere to set down and make repairs." Dax studied her science console, the display flickering with interference. "There's a rogue planetoid at bearing 047, minimal Dominion presence according to these readings. Class M atmosphere, breathable but hostile wildlife. We could hide there while we patch the cloak. Or we could be walking into a trap," Banks said, checking his rifle's ammunition counter. "The Dominion knows we're damaged. They'll be watching every possible refuge." The chief studied the tactical situation. Behind them, pursuit forces were tightening the net with methodical Jem'Hadar efficiency. Ahead, the wormhole back to Federation space was 4 days' travel at their current damage velocity, assuming they survived that long. "Set course for the planetoid," he decided. "We make repairs, reassess, and find an alternative route home." "Nog, how long for cloak restoration?" 6 hours minimum if we can fabricate replacement isolinear chips," the Ferengi replied. "But Chief, I'm an engineer, not a miracle worker. Some of this damage is beyond field repair." "Then we repair what we can," the chief said. "And we improvise the rest." Odo sat separately, his form still unstable from the Great Link integration. His humanoid shape kept blurring at the edges, as if he was struggling to maintain coherent identity. Dax moved to sit beside him. "Constable, your molecular cohesion is still fluctuating. The link did more damage than you're admitting." "The link didn't damage me," Odo replied quietly. "It showed me truth I've been avoiding. The founders aren't wrong about solids, Jadzia. They're just incomplete. They see the violence, the fear, the persecution. but they refuse to see the capacity for growth. Both perspectives are true simultaneously. That's what's tearing me apart. You're not torn apart, Dax said gently. You're experiencing cognitive dissonance. It means you're thinking critically instead of accepting dogma. That's healthy. Is it? Odo's form rippled. Or does it mean I don't belong anywhere? Not with the Founders, not with solids. Just alone. Before Dax could respond, proximity alarms shrieked. The view screen showed a Jem'Hadar battlecruiser emerging from the nebula's plasma curtain, weapons already charging. They found us! Nog shouted, throwing the runabout into evasive maneuvers that made the structural integrity field groan. Polaron beams lanced past, close enough that the energy wash disrupted sensors. The Rio Grande's shields flared, already weakened systems struggling under the assault. Palmer grabbed the tactical console. Returning fire, what little we can. Phasers at 40%, quantum torpedoes depleted. Chief, we can't win this fight. The battlecruiser closed, its massive bulk dwarfing the runabout. Then its weapons stopped firing. Instead, a transmission cut through, the familiar unsettling courtesy of a Vorta voice. UNSC vessel, this is First Luaren. You're damaged, outgunned, and have no escape route. But the Founders have authorized me to offer terms. Surrender peacefully, and your crew will be treated as prisoners of war under Dominion conventions. Continue resisting, and we will destroy you. You have 30 seconds to decide. The chief looked at his team, exhausted, wounded, running on fumes and determination. Palmer met his gaze, her expression grim but resolute. Banks checked his rifle one more time. DeMarco gave a fatalistic shrug. Dax's hand moved toward the helm, ready for whatever order came. Nog's ears drooped with fear, but he held position. Chief, Palmer said quietly, your call. But whatever you decide, we're with you. The chronometer counted down, 20 seconds. 15. 10. The chief opened a channel. First Luaren, this is Master Chief Petty Officer John 117. We reject your terms. Then you choose death. Luaren replied without emotion. So be it. The battlecruiser's weapons charged, and a massive explosion blossomed across its starboard flank. The entire ship lurched sideways as secondary detonations rippled through its hull. The Polaron arrays went dark, and the battlecruiser began listing, venting atmosphere and debris. What the hell just happened? Banks demanded. Dax's console lit up with new contacts. Ships decloaking, 3 birds of prey, Klingon configuration. They're engaging the battlecruiser. Through the view screen, 3 covert-class vessels materialized from cloak-like phantoms, their disruptor arrays blazing. The lead ship's commander opened a channel, and Commander Kalotha's scarred face filled the display, grinning with battle joy. Master Chief! We've been tracking your signature since you left Deep Space Nine. Chancellor Gowron suspected you'd need Klingon assistance. Humans always do when attempting glorious but suicidal missions. His laughter boomed. Today is a good day to rescue fools. The Klingon ships swarmed the damaged battlecruiser, their coordinated assault overwhelming its defensive systems. Within 2 minutes the Dominion vessel's warp core breached, and it disintegrated in a flash of antimatter annihilation. Kaloth, the chief said, genuine relief in his voice. Your timing is impeccable. Timing is everything in war and opera, Kaloth replied. Now, bring your damaged vessel alongside the Giaroth. We'll tow you out of this cursed nebula before more Jem'Hadar arrive. And then, you will share blood wine and tell me of your assault on the Founders. Such a tale deserves proper celebration. As tractor beams locked onto the Rio Grande and the Klingon ships engaged warp, pulling them away from Dominion pursuit, the tension aboard the runabout finally broke. DeMarco slumped against a bulkhead. Banks laughed, a slightly manic sound. Nog looked ready to cry with relief. Palmer removed her helmet, her expression caught between gratitude and frustration. We just got saved by Klingons singing battle songs. My life has gotten very strange. Odo's form stabilized slightly, his features resolving into something approaching his normal appearance. Strange. But effective. Perhaps that's the lesson. Neither pure Federation idealism nor pure UNSC pragmatism works alone. You need both. And sometimes, you need Klingon with terrible timing and wonderful luck. The chief allowed himself a small smile, invisible behind his helmet but present in his posture. Agreed. Nog, shut down non-essential systems. Let the Klingon do the flying. Everyone else, rest. We've got a long debrief ahead when we reach Federation space. As the runabout crossed into relatively safer regions of the Gamma Quadrant under Klingon escort, Dax pulled up long-range sensors. Benjamin is going to kill us! We were supposed to conduct reconnaissance, not assault the Founder's homeworld, get captured, stage a prison break, and require Klingon rescue. He'll understand, the chief replied. Missions never go according to plan. What matters is we survived and learned valuable intelligence. What intelligence? Palmer asked. That the Founders are paranoid shapeshifters who see solids as existential threats? We knew that already. We learned they're uncertain, Odo said quietly. The female Changeling expected us to fight when we surrendered. Expected violence when we chose vulnerability. That uncertainty, that crack in their absolute conviction, that's the opening we need. The chief nodded. The Covenant fell not because we defeated them militarily, but because we broke their religious certainty. Showed them their prophets were frauds. The Founders are the same, absolute conviction built on centuries of fear. If we can introduce doubt. The Dominion fractures, Dax finished. Vorta and Jem'Hadar start questioning their purpose. The whole authoritarian structure depends on the Founders' perceived infallibility. Exactly, the chief said. This mission wasn't a failure. It was reconnaissance. We've identified the enemy's weakness, not their military power, but their ideological rigidity. Now we exploit it. Kalotha's voice crackled through comms. Master Chief, we approach the wormhole in 2 hours. I've transmitted a priority message to Deep Space Nine. Captain Sisko knows you're returning. He sounded displeased. Apparently you violated several Starfleet regulations, 3 Federation treaties, and caused a diplomatic incident with the Dominion. Sounds about right. Palmer muttered. But, Kaloth continued cheerfully, you also survived an impossible mission, escaped Dominion custody, and struck fear into the Founders' hearts. The Empire commends your audacity. Kapla. As the transmission ended, Banks voiced what everyone was thinking. So we're heroes to the Klingon and war criminals to Starfleet. Perfect. We're soldiers, the chief corrected. We complete missions despite consequences. Starfleet will debate ethics. The Klingon will sing songs. The Dominion will adjust tactics. And we'll prepare for whatever comes next. Odo looked at him thoughtfully. You really believe this mission accomplished something, don't you? Despite the chaos, the near-death, the complete deviation from operational parameters? I believe, the chief said, that we showed the Founders something they've never seen before, solids choosing trust over violence, vulnerability over strength. Whether that matters depends on what they do with that knowledge. The wormhole appeared ahead, its blue-white brilliance cutting through the nebula's darkness. As the Klingon ships and their damaged runabout charge approached, crossing from Dominion space back toward Federation territory, the chief knew this was just the beginning. The Founders had seen UNSC capabilities firsthand. They'd witnessed Federation-Klingon cooperation. They'd experienced the cognitive dissonance of enemies who surrendered strategically rather than fight pointlessly. And somewhere in the Great Link, millions of changelings were processing that information, debating, arguing, questioning whether their certainties about solids remained absolute. The Dominion War had just entered a new phase. One where ideology mattered as much as firepower. And the UNSC had proven they could fight on both battlefields. Deep Space Nine's wardroom had the atmosphere of a court-martial, though no formal charges had been filed. Yet. Captain Sisko stood at the head of the table, his expression carved from stone. Admiral Ross attended via holoscreen, his disappointment palpable even through subspace transmission. Beside them, a Starfleet JAG officer named Captain Tvran reviewed datapads with Vulcan precision, cataloging every regulation the mission had violated. Master Chief, Commander Palmer, and the ODSTs stood at attention in fresh uniforms, their armor stored in DS9's security bay pending investigation. Odo and Dax sat as witnesses, both looking considerably less confident than when the mission had launched. "Let me see if I understand correctly," Sisko began, his voice dangerously calm. "You infiltrated the Founder's homeworld, entered the Great Link without authorization, surrendered to Dominion forces as part of an unauthorized tactical plan, staged a prison break that resulted in 47 Jem'Hadar casualties, and required Klingon intervention to extract. Have I missed anything?" "Sir," Palmer said carefully, "in our defense." "Commander Palmer, you violated the terms of your provisional asylum agreement," Admiral Ross interrupted. "The Federation granted UNSC personnel sanctuary on the condition you wouldn't destabilize our conflicts. This mission did exactly that." The chief stepped forward. "Admiral, with respect, the Dominion was already preparing countermeasures against UNSC tactics. We conducted reconnaissance to assess the Founder's capabilities and strategic thinking. The intelligence we gathered was obtained through methods Starfleet explicitly forbids," Captain Tvran stated. "Infiltration of enemy leadership facilities, attempted kidnapping of hostile government officials, and collaboration with Section 31 operatives. Under Federation law, these actions constitute war crimes." The room went silent. Banks shifted uncomfortably. "War crimes? We were trying to end the damn war. By assassinating the Founders," Sisko said flatly. "That was the mission objective, wasn't it? Section 31 provided resources for a decapitation strike disguised as reconnaissance." Odo spoke up. "Captain, the mission evolved beyond its original parameters. We didn't assassinate anyone. We attempted communication. After infiltrating their most sacred location," Sisko countered. "Constable, you violated the Great Link. That's not diplomacy. It's espionage. It was necessary," Odo replied, his voice gaining strength. "The Founders won't negotiate with solids. Someone had to reach them where they actually exist, not through Vorta intermediaries. I made that choice. A choice that nearly got you killed," Dax added quietly. "Odo's molecular cohesion is still unstable. The Great Link tried to absorb him permanently. He sacrificed his connection to his people for this mission." Admiral Ross's holographic image leaned forward. "Which brings us to the question of consequences. The Dominion has issued formal protests through neutral channels. They're calling this an act of terrorism and demanding the UNSC personnel be turned over for trial." "Absolutely not," Sisko said immediately, his command authority overriding diplomatic concerns. "Whatever violations occurred, I won't hand Federation-sheltered personnel to the Dominion for execution. Then Starfleet must take disciplinary action," Tvran stated. "The UNSC cannot operate with impunity within Federation jurisdiction." The chief's voice cut through the debate. "What would you have had us do? The Dominion views the UNSC as strategic assets to be captured or destroyed. We conducted a preemptive strike to demonstrate we're not passive targets. That's UNSC doctrine. Hit the enemy before they can concentrate forces against you. That doctrine," Ross replied, "is incompatible with Federation principles. We don't conduct preemptive strikes against enemy leadership. We don't collaborate with organizations like Section 31. And we certainly don't violate neutral territory to kidnap government officials. Even when those officials are engineering slave species and conducting wars of conquest?" Palmer challenged. "Even then," Ross said firmly. "Because the moment we compromise those principles, we become what we're fighting against." The chief removed his UNSC insignia from his uniform jacket and placed it on the table. "Then court-martial us." Charge us with whatever violations you need to preserve Federation principles. But don't pretend the Federation hasn't already compromised those principles. You developed a biogenic weapon to commit genocide against the Founders. You allied with Section 31. You're losing this war because you're fighting with one hand tied behind your back while telling yourselves its moral superiority. The statement hung in the air like an accusation no one could fully refute. Sisko's expression was unreadable. Chief, are you asking for a court-martial? I'm asking for honesty, the chief replied. Either the Federation accepts that war requires difficult choices and works with the UNSC as equals, or you admit you want us gone, and we find another way to survive in this reality. But stop pretending you're morally superior while using us for operations Starfleet won't officially conduct. Tuvran raised an eyebrow, the Vulcan equivalent of shock. That is an extraordinary accusation. It's an accurate one, Dax interjected. Benjamin, we all know Section 31 has been operating with tacit Starfleet approval. The UNSC just did openly what Section 31 does in shadows. If you're going to punish them, you need to acknowledge the hypocrisy. Ross and Sisko exchanged long looks, some unspoken communication between flag officers who navigated 2 years of impossible compromises. Finally, Ross spoke. Here's what's going to happen. Officially, the UNSC mission was an unauthorized operation that violated Federation protocols. Captain Lasky will receive a formal reprimand, and all UNSC personnel are restricted to Deep Space Nine pending review. No further independent operations without explicit Starfleet authorization. And unofficially? The chief asked. Unofficially, Sisko said quietly. The intelligence you gathered is valuable. The Founders' reaction to your surrender, their uncertainty, the ideological cracks Odo identified, all of it provides strategic advantage. Section 31 is already analyzing your mission recordings for exploitable weaknesses. So we're punished publicly while Section 31 uses our intelligence privately. Palmer said bitterly. That's the Federation way? That's war. Ross replied. Messy, contradictory, and morally complicated. Welcome to the reality we've been living for 2 years. The chief picked up his insignia, pinning it back on. What about future operations? The UNSC won't sit idle while the Dominion prepares countermeasures. Future operations will be coordinated through Starfleet Command, Sisko stated firmly. No more independent strikes. If you want to contribute to the war effort, you do it within our command structure. Meaning we become Starfleet auxiliaries, Banks muttered. Following regulations that got you into this mess. Meaning you become allies instead of loose cannons, Sisko corrected. Chief, I respect UNSC capabilities. But I can't have a displaced military force conducting black ops in Federation space without oversight. That's not alliance, that's chaos. The chief considered this, his tactical mind calculating advantages and limitations. The UNSC had always operated independently, answering only to UNSC High Command. Subordinating to Starfleet meant accepting restrictions that could get people killed. But it also meant resources, intelligence networks, and legitimacy in this reality. Conditional acceptance, the chief said finally. UNSC forces coordinate with Starfleet on strategic operations. But we maintain tactical autonomy in combat situations. Spartans don't follow orders that contradict survival doctrine. That's not how military command works, Tuvran began. It's how the UNSC works, the chief interrupted. We've survived 30 years of extinction-level warfare by trusting our soldiers' judgment in the field. I won't compromise that for bureaucratic chain of command. Ross considered this. Modified proposal. UNSC forces operate as special operations units under Starfleet coordination. You receive mission objectives from command, but tactical execution remains your discretion. Standard Special Forces protocol. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. Accepted, the chief said. Then we have an agreement, Sisko said, visible relief crossing his features. Chief Palmer. You're officially attached to Deep Space Nine as Special Operations Advisors. Your expertise will be invaluable as the war progresses. As the meeting dissolved, Odo approached the chief privately. You manipulated that entire negotiation. You wanted to be integrated into Starfleet command structure from the beginning. I wanted the UNSC to have legitimacy and resources. The chief corrected. Playing the uncontrollable wild cards forced Starfleet to formalize our relationship on terms we could accept. If I'd asked politely, we'd have been sidelined. Devious, Odo observed. The founders would approve, if they approved of anything solids did. How are you? The chief asked, noting Odo's still unstable form. Conflicted, Odo admitted. The Great Link showed me the founders' perspective, centuries of persecution, fear, survival through control. I understand them better now. But I also see how that fear has corrupted them into becoming oppressors themselves. I'm caught between two incomplete truths. That's called perspective, the chief said. The ability to see multiple truths simultaneously. It's uncomfortable, but it's what separates thinking beings from ideologues. Odo's form rippled with what might have been appreciation. Is that UNSC philosophy? It's Cortana's philosophy, the chief replied quietly. My AI partner. She used to say the most dangerous people are the ones who believe they're absolutely right. Because they stop questioning, stop adapting, stop growing. Where is she now? Odo asked. The chief was silent for a long moment. Gone. But her lessons remain. As DS-9 resumed its normal operations, damaged but functioning, scarred but unbowed, the UNSC personnel began their integration into Starfleet operations. It wouldn't be smooth. Cultural differences, tactical disagreements, and philosophical conflicts would create constant friction. But the mission to the Founders' Homeworld had proven something crucial. When Federation idealism and UNSC pragmatism combined, when Klingon honor and Changeling perspective added to the mix, the result was greater than any single approach. The Dominion had the numbers, the territory, and the conviction. But the alliance forming around Deep Space Nine had something more dangerous: diversity of thought, adaptation through conflict, and the willingness to question their own certainties. The war was far from over. But the balance had shifted. 3 weeks after the Founders' Homeworld mission, the Dominion launched its response. The attack came without warning, a massive fleet emerging from the Bajoran wormhole in coordinated assault formation. 50 Jem'Hadar attack ships, 12 battlecruisers, and something Deep Space Nine's sensors had never detected before. A Founder-class dreadnought, its hull composed of living changeling matter integrated with Dominion technology. All hands to battle stations. Sisko's voice echoed through the station as alarms shrieked. This is not a drill. Master Chief reached ops within 30 seconds, his Mjolnir armor sealed and weapons systems online. Palmer and her Spartan 4 teams were already deploying to critical defense points throughout the station. The ODSTs manned DS-9's weapon emplacements alongside Starfleet personnel, their UNSC training bringing lethal efficiency to Federation systems. Dominion fleet is charging weapons, Kira reported, her Bajoran combat instincts evident in her crisp tactical assessments. They're not hailing, not demanding surrender. This is an elimination strike. Dax's hands flew across her science console. Benjamin, that dreadnought, it's not just a ship. Sensors are reading changeling bioelectric signatures throughout its entire structure. It's a fusion of Founder consciousness and Starship technology. Nothing like this exists in our databases. The chief studied the tactical display. Standard Dominion doctrine would be to overwhelm DS-9's defenses through numerical superiority, then board and seize the station. But this formation was different, concentrated firepower designed not to capture but to obliterate. They're not here for the station, the chief said. They're here for us. The UNSC. This is retaliation for the Homeworld mission. As if confirming his assessment, a transmission cut through from the Founder dreadnought. The female changeling appeared on screen, her expression carrying cold fury. Master Chief. Captain Sisko. You violated the Great Link. You brought violence to the one place changelings considered sacred. You demonstrated that nowhere, not even the heart of the Dominion, is safe from solid aggression. Her voice was ice. The Founders have reached consensus. The UNSC represents an unacceptable threat. You will be eliminated. Deep Space Nine will be destroyed. And the Federation will learn the cost of harboring enemies of order. Sisko stepped forward. We can negotiate. Negotiation requires trust. She interrupted. You destroyed that possibility when you infiltrated our homeworld. Now there is only consequence. The transmission ended. The Dominion fleet opened fire. Polaron beams converged on Deep Space Nine from 40 different vectors simultaneously. The station shields flared brilliant cyan, absorbing the initial assault, but power readings immediately dropped 15%. This wasn't probing fire. This was sustained bombardment designed to overwhelm defensive capabilities through sheer volume. Return fire! Sisko ordered. All phaser arrays, full spread. Launch quantum torpedoes. Target the battlecruisers first. DS-9's weapon systems blazed to life, orange phaser beams and blue-white quantum torpedoes streaking toward the Dominion fleet. Several Jem'Hadar attack ships exploded under the concentrated firepower, but the battlecruisers' shields absorbed the hits and continued their advance. The Founder dreadnought hung back, observing, studying, learning. Chief, Palmer's voice crackled through comms. We've got Jem'Hadar boarding craft launching. 20 transports heading for docking ports and hull breaches. They're going to try the same tactic they used on the Infinity. All Spartan teams, defensive positions, the chief ordered. Remember, they've adapted to our tactics. Expect countermeasures to everything we used before. Banks reported from his weapon emplacement. These bastards are smart. They're using rotating shield frequencies to counter our targeting algorithms. UNSC weapons can't lock on. Then go manual, the chief replied. ODSTs switch to visual targeting. Spartan teams, prepare for close-quarters engagement. The first Jem'Hadar boarding craft attached to DS-9's lower docking pylons. Plasma cutters began carving through the reinforced hull plating. Inside, Spartan 4 teams waited with grim readiness, their experience from the Infinity informing new defensive tactics. The breach opened. Jem'Hadar soldiers poured through, and immediately encountered a kill zone the UNSC had prepared specifically for this scenario. Automated turrets synced with Spartan HUD targeting systems created overlapping fields of fire. The Jem'Hadar fell in waves, but more kept coming, stepping over their dead without hesitation. They're not stopping! DeMarco shouted, his rifle overheating from sustained fire. There's too many. In ops, Dax tracked multiple catastrophic failures. Shields at 40% and dropping. Hull breaches on Deck 7, 12, and 18. Jem'Hadar are establishing beachheads faster than we can repel them. Sisko's jaw tightened. Kira, contact the Defiant. Tell them to break off their patrol and return immediately. We need... Sir. Dax interrupted, her voice carrying hope and disbelief. Multiple warp signatures incoming. Klingon fleet, Chancellor Gowron's personal armada. Through the viewscreen, 30 Klingon warships dropped out of warp in perfect attack formation. Birds of prey, Vorcha-class cruisers, and at the center, Gowron's flagship, a massive Navar-class battleship bristling with weapons. Gowron's face filled the screen, his eyes blazing with battle joy. Captain Sisko! Master Chief! The Empire does not forget its debts. Today we repay Klingon honor! He raised his decay-togged blade. Jem'Hadar cowards, face warriors who welcome death. Kapla. The Klingon fleet crashed into the Dominion formation like a tsunami. Disruptor fire and photon torpedoes created a light show of destruction as ships clashed in brutal close-quarters combat. The Klingon didn't maneuver elegantly. They charged directly into enemy fire, their aggressive tactics catching the methodical Jem'Hadar off guard. But the Founder dreadnought remained untouched, observing the chaos with alien intelligence. "Chief," Odo said quietly from his security station, "that dreadnought is analyzing everything. Every tactic, every weapon signature, every formation. The Founders are using this battle as data collection. Then we give them data they can't use," the chief replied. He opened a channel to all UNSC personnel. "All teams, Protocol Omega-7. Randomize everything, firing patterns, movement vectors, communication frequencies. No repeatable behaviors. Make adaptation impossible." Palmer understood immediately. "Spartans, acknowledge Omega-7. Go full chaos mode." Throughout the station, UNSC forces abandoned coordinated tactics for controlled unpredictability. Spartans attacked from unexpected angles, ODSTs fired in irregular patterns, automated defenses switched between multiple programming modes. The Jem'Hadar, trained for predictable combat doctrine, struggled against opponents who refused to follow any doctrine at all. The boarding actions devolved into brutal corridor fighting. Master Chief found himself back-to-back with a Bajoran security officer, their combined fire holding a choke point against 30 Jem'Hadar. The chief's shields failed, his armor took direct hits, but his augmented reflexes kept him moving, rolling, firing, repositioning in patterns no tactical computer could predict. A Jem'Hadar first charged with Kartakin raised, screaming battle cries and loyalty to the Founders. The chief caught the blade on his armored forearm, the impact cracking ceramic plating, then drove his combat knife through the soldier's throat. As the Jem'Hadar fell, the chief recognized something in the dying warrior's eyes: doubt. These soldiers were questioning their purpose. The Great Link's absolute certainty was fracturing. In space, the Klingon-Dominion battle reached critical mass. Ships on both sides burned, debris fields expanded, and casualties mounted into the thousands. But the Klingon were winning through sheer ferocity, their willingness to die gloriously outmatching Jem'Hadar genetic programming for victory. Then the Founder dreadnought moved. Its living hull rippled, and weapons unlike anything in Starfleet databases emerged. The ship fired, not energy beams or torpedoes, but streams of weaponized changeling matter that flowed through shields like they weren't there and began consuming ship hulls directly. 2 Klingon birds of prey simply dissolved, their molecular structures breaking down as changeling matter infected their physical integrity. A Vorchak cruiser tried to escape and was caught mid-warp, its nacelles liquefying. "What the hell is that weapon?" Kira demanded. "Biological warfare on a ship scale," Dax replied, horrified. "The Founders are using their own matter as a corrosive agent. Conventional shields can't stop it because it's not energy, it's living tissue." The chief watched 3 more Klingon ships die to the impossible weapon. "Odo, can changeling matter be disrupted? Electromagnetic pulses, radiation, anything?" Odo's expression was grim. High-intensity radiation could destabilize changeling molecular cohesion. But the levels required would kill everyone aboard any ship that deployed it. "Not everyone," the chief said, an idea forming. "Not Spartans in sealed Mjolnir armor." Palmer caught his intent. "Chief, you're not seriously proposing a boarding action on that dreadnought," the chief finished. "Spartan team, radiation-shielded armor, plant a Mark 7 fusion warhead at the ship's core. Detonate it from inside, destabilize the changeling matter holding the ship together." Sisko turned from the tactical display. "That's suicide. Even with radiation shielding, your team wouldn't survive long enough to extract." "Probably not," the chief agreed. "But it would work. And it would prove to the Founders that their new weapon isn't invincible." "I'm not authorizing a suicide mission," Sisko said flatly. "Then I'm going unauthorized," the chief replied, already moving toward the docking bay. "Palmer, assemble a volunteer team. Anyone who's not willing to die today stays behind." Every Spartan 4 immediately volunteered. As the chief prepared for what might be his final mission, Odo approached. "Chief, let me come with you. Changeling matter can't harm another changeling. I can navigate that ship's interior and help you reach the core." You'd be betraying the founders completely, the chief said. I already did that when I chose solids, Odo replied. Now I'm just finishing what I started. The runabout Rio Grande launched from Deep Space Nine's docking bay under heavy fire, its hull immediately scarred by glancing polaron beams. Master Chief piloted with Spartan reflexes while Palmer, DeMarco, and 3 other Spartan Iverses checked their radiation-shielded armor seals one final time. Odo sat in the co-pilot's seat, his liquid form already adapting to resist the changeling corrosive matter they'd encounter. Dreadnought is 200 kilometers and closing, Dax reported through comms from DS9. Chief, their weapons are charging. They've detected your launch. Klingon fleet, this is Master Chief. The chief transmitted on open frequencies. We need a corridor to that dreadnought. 30 seconds of clear space. Gowron's response was immediate and gleeful. You attack the Founder Abomination directly? Glorious! All ships, concentrate fire. Give the Spartans their corridor or die trying. 20 Klingon vessels converged on the dreadnought, their combined firepower creating a temporary gap in the Dominion defensive perimeter. The Rio Grande accelerated through the opening, dodging debris and weapons fire with maneuvers that pushed the inertial dampeners to their limits. Approaching docking range, the chief announced. Odo, can you sense an entry point? Odo's eyes unfocused as he reached out with changeling senses. Starboard ventral section. There's a membrane interface where founder matter transitions to solid technology. I can open it. But Chief, the ship knows we're coming. The Great Link consciousness inside is preparing countermeasures. Then we move fast, the chief replied, bringing the runabout alongside the dreadnought's rippling hull. The ship's surface was nightmare-inducing. Organic changeling tissue merged with Dominion technology in ways that defied normal physics. Conduits pulsed like veins, hull plates shifted like breathing skin, and the entire structure radiated hostile intelligence. Odo placed his hand against the runabout's hull, his form extending through the metal and into the dreadnought's organic surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the founder's ship's membrane began to open, reluctantly, fighting Odo's control, but ultimately yielding to another changeling's will. It's working, Palmer said. We've got a breach. The Spartan team poured through the opening into the dreadnought's interior. What they found defied description. Corridors that were simultaneously organic and technological, walls that rippled with awareness, and an atmosphere thick with the electric tang of changeling consciousness. Radiation levels are already climbing, DeMarco reported, his armor's sensors flashing warnings. We've got maybe 15 minutes before exposure exceeds safe limits even with shielding. Then we make it count, the chief said, pulling up the Mark 7 fusion warhead from his equipment pack. Odo, guide us to the ship's core. Fastest route, ignore stealth. They moved through corridors that actively resisted them, walls closing like sphincters, floors becoming adhesive liquid, an atmosphere thickening to slow movement. But Odo's changeling nature gave them passage, his will forcing compliance from the ship's integrated consciousness. Then they encountered the dreadnought's defenders. Jem'Hadar emerged from walls that dissolved to release them. Elite guards wearing radiation-hardened armor and carrying weapons designed to kill in the founder-saturated environment. But more disturbing were the hybrid creatures that followed, changeling Jem'Hadar fusion entities, their bodies shifting between solid and liquid states, combining shapeshifter adaptability with warrior aggression. Contact! Palmer opened fire, her MA-5D rounds striking a hybrid that partially liquefied to avoid the bullets before reforming and charging. The Spartans engaged in the most bizarre combat of their careers, fighting enemies that could flow through barricades, survive lethal hits by dispersing, and attack from angles that solid creatures couldn't access. The chief emptied his magazine into a hybrid, the rounds passing through its liquid torso harmlessly. He adapted instantly, drawing his combat knife and slashing horizontally, not to cut, but to disrupt the creature's molecular cohesion. The blade's edge created enough structural stress that the hybrid couldn't maintain form, collapsing into inert puddles. Aim for structural disruption, not direct damage, the chief ordered. Force them to maintain cohesion under stress. The Spartans adapted, their superior reflexes and tactical creativity turning the corridor into a kill zone despite fighting enemies that could theoretically be unkillable. DeMarco used grenades not for explosive damage, but for shockwave disruption. Palmer fired at the deck plating beneath hybrids, destabilizing their anchoring points. The ODSTs coordinated crossfire that forced enemies to simultaneously defend multiple vectors, overwhelming their shape-shifting capabilities. But time was bleeding away. Radiation exposure warnings escalated from yellow to orange to red. "Core is ahead!" Odo shouted, pointing to a massive chamber where the corridor opened into a spherical space 50 meters in diameter. At its center floated a sphere of pure changeling matter, hundreds of founders in liquid form, providing the consciousness that animated the entire dreadnought. And surrounding the sphere, standing in perfect formation, were 12 founders in humanoid form. The female changeling stood at their center, her expression carrying grim resolve. "You came," she said, unsurprised. "Of course you did. Solids are predictable. You always choose violence when threatened." The chief raised the Mark 7 warhead. "We choose survival. There's a difference." "Is there?" She gestured to the device. "You bring nuclear fire to the Great Link. How is that different from the persecution changelings have suffered for millennia?" "Because we warned you," the chief replied. "After our Homeworld mission, you knew we were capable of this. You could have chosen negotiation. Instead, you built this weapon ship and attacked a civilian station. You forced this response. We responded to your violation of the Great Link," she countered. "You brought violence to our most sacred space." "We brought questions," Odo interjected, stepping between the chief and the founders. "Questions you're terrified to answer. If solids are truly inferior, why do you fear them so much? If the Dominion represents order and enlightenment, why does it require slave species and conquest? If the founders are perfect, why did one of your own choose to leave?" The female changeling's expression flickered. "Odo, you've doomed yourself by bringing them here. The link will absorb you permanently for this betrayal. Then absorb me," Odo said, his form becoming liquid and flowing toward the central sphere. "Show these solids what happens to changelings who question the Founder's certainty. Prove to them that you're exactly the authoritarians they believe you are." He merged with the Great Link sphere, and immediately the chamber erupted with energy. The Founders surrounding the sphere reacted with shock as Odo's consciousness integrated. Not submissively, but confrontationally, broadcasting everything he'd learned among solids directly into the link's shared awareness. The chief felt it through his armor sensors, a massive electromagnetic surge as millions of changeling minds processed contradictory information simultaneously. Odo was showing them Deep Space Nine's diversity, Starfleet's principles, the UNSC's survival-driven pragmatism, Klingon honor, and most importantly, the possibility that solids weren't the enemy. The female changeling staggered, her humanoid form wavering. "What are you doing?" "Giving them a choice," Odo's voice echoed from within the link. "Something the Founders never allowed." The other Founders began destabilizing, their certainty fracturing under the weight of new perspectives. The dreadnought itself shuddered, its integrated consciousness losing coherence as the link descended into unprecedented internal conflict. "Chief!" Palmer shouted. "The ship's structure is failing. If the link loses cohesion, this whole vessel will collapse." The chief looked at the Mark 7 warhead in his hands, then at the Founders struggling to maintain their absolute conviction. He'd come here to destroy the ship, to eliminate the threat through overwhelming force. But Odo had just given him a different option. "Stand down," the chief ordered, lowering the warhead. "All Spartans, defensive posture only. We're not the ones killing this ship, it's killing itself." The female changeling's form rippled with desperate rage and fear. "You've destroyed the link's unity. Centuries of shared consciousness, shattered by one dissenting changeling. Unity based on fear isn't strength," the chief replied. Its fragility. You built the Dominion on absolute conviction, and Odo just proved that conviction was incomplete. Now you have to choose, adapt to new information, or fracture trying to maintain the old certainty. The Great Link sphere pulsed with chaotic energy, changeling matter swirling in patterns that suggested fierce internal debate. Then, slowly, figures began separating from the mass, individual founders choosing to leave the link, to exist independently, to think for themselves. Not all of them. Perhaps not even most. But enough to matter. The female changeling watched with an expression caught between horror and recognition. You've won. Not through violence, but through ideological contamination. The Great Link will never be the same. Good. Odo's voice emerged as his form separated from the sphere, exhausted but intact. Perfection is stagnation. Uncertainty is growth. The founders needed to learn that. The dreadnought began powering down, its weapons deactivating as the link's consensus to continue combat dissolved. In space around Deep Space Nine, the Dominion fleet received simultaneous stand-down orders, their coordinated assault fragmenting into confused withdrawal. Sisko's voice crackled through comms. Chief, whatever you did, it worked. The Dominion is retreating. The battle's over. But as the Spartan team evacuated the dying dreadnought and returned to DS9, the chief knew the larger war wasn't finished. The founders had been forced to question their certainty, but that could either lead to negotiation or to even more desperate violence. The only certainty was that nothing would be the same. The UNSC had brought a third philosophy to the Alpha Quadrant's conflicts. Not Federation idealism, not Klingon honor, but adaptive pragmatism willing to question everything, including itself. And in a war fought as much through ideology as firepower, that might be the weapon that mattered most. The wardroom aboard Deep Space Nine felt different now, less like a court-martial chamber and more like a war council where equals debated the future. Captain Sisko sat with Admiral Ross's holographic presence, while Master Chief, Commander Palmer, and Odo occupied seats that had been formally assigned rather than grudgingly permitted. 3 weeks had passed since the Founder Dreadnought's collapse. 3 weeks of tense ceasefire negotiations, intelligence analysis, and the slow, painful process of understanding what Odo's intervention in the Great Link had actually accomplished. Dominion fleet movements have decreased by 47%, Dax reported, pulling up tactical displays. Their offensive operations have become defensive posturing. It's not peace, but it's not active warfare either. Admiral Ross leaned forward in his holographic form. Our intelligence indicates the Great Link is fractured. Not destroyed, but no longer operating as a unified consciousness. Individual founders are making independent decisions, sometimes contradicting each other. Or it could be the opening for actual negotiation, the chief countered. The founders' absolute conviction was the obstacle to peace. Now that conviction is broken. Individual changelings are questioning whether the Dominion's expansion serves changeling survival or just perpetuates the fear that created it. Odo sat quietly, his form more stable now but still bearing the marks of his ordeal. The Great Link will never recover its previous unity. I saw to that. By introducing doubt. Genuine, irreversible doubt, I ensured the founders would have to debate rather than decree. Some will cling to the old certainties. Others will explore new possibilities. The Dominion's future depends on which faction prevails. And what happens to you? Dax asked gently. You've been exiled from the link permanently. The founders won't forgive what you did. I don't need their forgiveness. Odo replied. I made my choice years ago when I stayed with solids. This was simply making that choice irrevocable. He glanced at the chief. I learned something from the UNSC. That adaptation requires accepting permanent consequences. You can't evolve while clinging to what you were. Palmer spoke up. Admiral, what's the status of UNSC personnel integration? Are we still restricted to Deep Space Nine, or are we cleared for operations? Ross exchanged looks with Sisko before responding. Starfleet Command has reviewed the Founder Homeworld mission and its outcomes. While the methods remain controversial, the results speak for themselves. The UNSC's willingness to take calculated risks achieved what 2 years of conventional warfare couldn't: ideological fracture in the enemy's leadership. Which means? Palmer pressed. Which means? Sisko said with a slight smile. The UNSC is officially recognized as a strategic partner in the Dominion War. Captain Lasky has been offered a commission as a Starfleet Reserve Captain with autonomous command authority over UNSC forces. The Spartan teams will operate as Special Operations Units under Joint Federation UNSC oversight. The Chief absorbed this. And our long-term status? The UNSC is still stranded in this reality. We still need to find a way home. Dax pulled up new data. Complex subspace topology readings and dimensional mechanics calculations. I've been working on that. The spatial anomaly that brought the infinity here left residual quantum signatures. With enough power and precise calibration, I believe we could recreate the conditions for a controlled dimensional transit. How much power? Palmer asked. Equivalent to a Galaxy-class starship's warp core operating at maximum output for 72 continuous hours. Dax replied. And the probability of success is still only 53%. There's also a 31% chance the attempt would create a permanent dimensional rift that could destabilize both realities. Unacceptable risk, the chief said immediately. We're not gambling with universal stability because we want to go home. Then what? Banks asked from his position by the door. We stay here permanently? Build a life in someone else's universe? We do what the UNSC has always done, the chief replied. We adapt. This reality needs us. The war isn't over, the Dominion is unstable, and the Federation needs allies who understand that survival sometimes requires difficult choices. While the methods remain controversial, the results speak for themselves. The UNSC's willingness to take calculated risks achieved what 2 years of conventional warfare couldn't: ideological fracture in the enemy's leadership. Which means? Palmer pressed. Which means? Sisko said with a slight smile. The UNSC is officially recognized as a strategic partner in the Dominion War. Captain Lasky has been offered a commission as a Starfleet Reserve Captain with autonomous command authority over UNSC forces. The Spartan teams will operate as Special Operations Units under Joint Federation UNSC oversight. The chief absorbed this. And our long-term status? The UNSC is still stranded in this reality. We still need to find a way home. Dax pulled up new data. Complex subspace topology readings and dimensional mechanics calculations. I've been working on that. The spatial anomaly that brought the infinity here left residual quantum signatures. With enough power and precise calibration, I believe we could recreate the conditions for a controlled dimensional transit. How much power? Palmer asked. Equivalent to a Galaxy-class starship's warp core operating at maximum output for 72 continuous hours. Dax replied. And the probability of success is still only 53%. There's also a 31% chance the attempt would create a permanent dimensional rift that could destabilize both realities. Unacceptable risk, the chief said immediately. We're not gambling with universal stability because we want to go home. Then what? Banks asked from his position by the door. We stay here permanently? Build a life in someone else's universe? We do what the UNSC has always done, the chief replied. We adapt. This reality needs us. The war isn't over, the Dominion is unstable, and the Federation needs allies who understand that survival sometimes requires difficult choices. We can serve that purpose while continuing research into safer methods of returning home. Ross nodded approvingly. A mature perspective, Chief. Starfleet is prepared to support ongoing research into dimensional transit, while utilizing UNSC capabilities in the current conflict. You're not prisoners here, you're allies who happen to be displaced. Speaking of allies, Kira interjected, entering the wardroom with a data pad. The Klingon Empire has sent formal commendation. Chancellor Garon wants to award the Master Chief the Order of the Batleth for the dreadnought assault. He's also requesting UNSC advisors to train Klingon special forces in Spartan tactics. Palmer grinned. Klingon with Spartan training. That's either brilliant or terrifying. Probably both, the chief said. Accept the commendation, decline the training request. The last thing this quadrant needs is Klingon who fight like Spartans. As the meeting continued discussing operational integration and resource allocation, Odo motioned for the chief to step aside privately. They moved to the observation window overlooking the Bajoran wormhole, the gateway between quadrants, between realities, between what was and what might be. Chief, Odo said quietly, I wanted to thank you for trusting me to enter the Great Link, for not detonating that warhead when you could have. You gave the Founders a chance to choose change over destruction. Not many soldiers would have made that choice. I learned it from someone. The chief replied, thinking of Cortana, of all the times she'd argued for the diplomatic solution, the creative alternative, the path that didn't require killing everything in sight. A very smart AI who believed the best victories are the ones where nobody has to die. She sounds wise. She was. The chief paused. Odo, what you did in the Great Link, forcing them to confront uncertainty, that took courage. You gave up your connection to your people permanently. That's a sacrifice I understand. Odo's liquid form rippled with emotion he usually suppressed. Do you ever regret it? Becoming a Spartan, being augmented, giving up a normal life for warfare? The chief was silent for a long moment, watching the wormhole's blue-white luminescence pulse like a cosmic heartbeat. Regret implies wishing things were different. I don't have that luxury. The augmentations, the training, the sacrifices, they were necessary for humanity's survival. I can't regret what saved my species. But you can mourn what you lost. Odo observed. Every day. The chief admitted quietly. Every single day. They stood together in companionable silence, a Spartan super soldier and a changeling security chief, both outsiders in their own ways, both shaped by choices they couldn't unmake, both finding purpose in protection rather than belonging. Behind them, the wardroom's discussion turned to future operations. Joint Federation UNSC missions, intelligence sharing with Klingon allies, and contingency planning for Dominion factional conflicts. The war would continue in new forms, with new challenges, but also with new possibilities. Captain Lasky entered the observation area, joining the chief. John, Starfleet's offering us the USS Artemis, a Defiant-class escort they're pulling from mothball. Small crew, powerful weapons, designed for the kind of operations we excel at. They want us to command it as a dedicated UNSC vessel operating under Federation authority. Accepting would make us permanent fixtures here, the chief observed. Would that be so terrible? Lasky asked. We've lost our ship, but we haven't lost our purpose. The UNSC has always fought for humanity's survival, not just our humanity, but the principle of human existence. This reality's humanity needs us as much as our own did. Palmer approached, having overheard. Sir, the Spartan Iversus are ready to stay if you order it. But they deserve to know, is this temporary assignment, or are we building a new life here? The chief looked at his team, Spartans who'd followed him through impossible battles, who'd survived the Infinity's destruction, who'd raided the Founder's homeworld and lived to tell about it. They deserved honesty. We're building something new, he said finally. Not replacing what we lost, but creating what this reality needs. We stay, we fight, we adapt. And if we ever find a safe way home, we'll take it. But until then, this is our war now. These are our people to protect. Palmer nodded, respect evident in her posture. Then I guess the Spartans are staying in Starfleet. At least until we finish the fight. Spartans never die. Banks quoted from across the room. They're just missing in action. Guess that applies to entire realities now. As Deep Space Nine continued its vigil at the edge of Federation space, monitoring the unstable Dominion and preparing for whatever came next, the UNSC personnel began their transformation from displaced soldiers to permanent residents of an alternate reality. They would keep their traditions, the Spartan codes, the UNSC protocols, the hard-learned lessons of 30 years fighting the Covenant. But they would also learn new ones. Federation principles, Klingon honor, the complex morality of a universe where not every problem could be solved with superior firepower. The Master Chief stood at the observation window long after the others had left, watching the wormhole pulse with rhythmic light. Somewhere beyond that gateway, the Dominion fractured under the weight of uncertainty. Somewhere in the Alpha Quadrant, the Federation struggled to maintain its principles while fighting for survival. Somewhere in this strange new reality, a version of humanity needed protecting. And protecting humanity, in whatever form, in whatever universe, had always been the mission. Some wars ended with victory parades and peace treaties. Others ended with quiet acceptance that the fight would continue in different forms, against different enemies, for different stakes. The Chief had spent 30 years fighting for humanity's survival against the Covenant. Now he'd spend however long it took fighting for humanity's principles against those who'd sacrificed them for security. Different universe. Different war. Same mission. Finish the fight. The UNSC's journey in the Star Trek universe had transformed from accident to purpose, from crisis to opportunity. They'd proven that military pragmatism and Federation idealism could coexist, that survival and principles weren't mutually exclusive, and that sometimes the greatest victories came not from destroying enemies but from forcing them to question their own certainties. Master Chief and the UNSC personnel would continue serving aboard Deep Space Nine and the newly assigned USS Artemis, their Spartan capabilities and tactical doctrine becoming integral to the Federation's defense. The Dominion War would continue, but forever changed by the presence of soldiers who'd survived extinction-level warfare and learned that adaptation mattered more than tradition. The Founders would grapple with their fractured Great Link, some clinging to old fears while others explored the possibility that solids might be partners rather than threats. Odo would serve as bridge between worlds, his sacrifice having created space for dialogue that hadn't existed before. And somewhere in the quantum mechanics of dimensional physics, the possibility of home remained, distant, uncertain, but not impossible. Until that day, the UNSC would do what they'd always done. Protect humanity. Finish the mission, and prove that no matter what universe you're in, courage and conviction can change the course of history. Live long and prosper. And finish the fight. Hit the subscribe button for more interesting stories. Thank you for watching.